are going to start to talk about the next exercise, which is the hybrid exercise that we first introduced to you the first night of the class. And what I'd like to do is to provide you with three different parts. First, the directions for this exercise. Second, ideas on how to get started. And then third, your final submission. So let's get started with the first part, directions. In Blackboard, as you know, all the information in the course is contained. To find the online exercise, you would scroll down under Course Documents and you click on the online exercise and you'll see hybrid exercise number 1. This exercise is an exercise that we connect with human resources because it's an exercise that has to do with a budget reduction activity. And although budget reductions could be considered a math exercise, when you're dealing with staff reductions, it's much more of a human resource exercise. So in the part of that computer section on the hybrid exercise, first read the exercise. You'll find that once again, we're back to Bloomberg University, and we'll learn a little bit more about Bloomberg University. Because to be successful in this exercise, you will need to look at a number of documents. And listed right underneath the description of the exercise are documents that will be a help to you. There are documents that deal with budget, they deal with the strategic plan, academic achievement, student surveys. And while the goal is to do the staff reductions, you really need to think about why it is you would reduce, and that is the reason for these documents. You've already had an opportunity to get a little acquainted with each other as members of cabinets, and in this exercise, you're going to be working with the roles that you assumed as part of the cabinet. So the getting started is really to acquaint yourself where everything is. And the first part is the exercise itself. The second part is where the activity will actually take place. And in Blackboard, on the upper left-hand side under Menu, you will see Groups. Click on the groups and find your group. This class, there are 3 different groups. And in each group, you will have the roles assigned that you selected. And you are to a degree role play as you were in that job as part of this exercise. So the way you get started is that someone in the group would click on Create Thread, and that's the way you put your entry into the discussion board in Blackboard and get started in the manner in which you would like to meet. Now, this exercise is an online exercise, and we would like very much for you to, as much as possible, have all of your communication in an online capacity. However, we know that in times people do want to get together, and Ron and I are certainly supportive of that. So if you want to plan over the period of time of this exercise to have an in-person meeting, some of what you might get started with in setting up your discussion is whether you are going to only meet online or whether you are going to meet in person. And someone in that group would decide the date and location for that meeting. So all of this is part of the first section, which I mentioned is the part about the directions and getting started. The next part is the actual working online, and I have some suggestions for you because having this exercise with prior classes, there were certain kinds of techniques and structures which worked well. The first technique was to set up a person who would be somewhat of the project manager, the person who would be in charge of making sure that everybody is participating, reaching out to somebody who might not participate, the person who would take a look at the calendar. It's a 2-week exercise, and towards the end, decide when there has been enough information so that you could start thinking about the final paper. The way in which most students work is that the exercise is assigned on March the 3rd, and generally the next week you should still be working in your asynchronous manner or having your team meetings. And then towards the following weekend, I'd say closer to the 12th or the 13th of March, is when you start thinking about formulating the final part of this, which is the final paper. The final submission will be a memo, and the memo is to the president of Bloomberg, and we have co-presidents in being Ron and I, and the length is usually around 3 pages. So in terms of putting that together, you need another person, an editor. So the key roles would be the project manager and the editor, so that that person is in charge of putting all the thoughts of the different threads together in a final document. Some groups have had the use of Google Docs and then use that as a co-authoring tool. And then the final submission will still be in the Blackboard environment. You can post it in your team. Ron and I also would very much appreciate your emailing the final submission to us on March the 14th by the end of the day. That's the Monday before the final, the class will be seeing your presentation. And that brings up the third role. The third role is a presenter. So you don't have to figure that out at the very beginning. As you develop your response to the final submission, you might decide on who would be presenting it. You can either have somebody stand up in front of the room and present the memo, or some groups have chosen to use PowerPoint as their presentation style, which would be giving the solution to the problem as to how you would take care of this budget reduction. So I think we've talked about 3 different elements: the directions, the getting started, as part of getting started, the content of what goes on, and that would lead us off to the very final part of this, which is the submission of the actual document. Goals in doing this have been to try to give you an opportunity to work as a team, to work as your cabinet for president trying to solve a budget crisis, which is very common these days, and also to learn a little bit about how to work together as a group. You will notice that the week following the presentation of the final product, the March 17th is the presentation, we asked you to do a peer evaluation. And the goal of the peer evaluation is to provide feedback to each other on how you functioned within that team. There is criteria that is listed for the peer evaluation in the Blackboard environment, and you'll have an opportunity to give some measurement as well as comments about how each other did in this exercise. We use this to make sure that we have a sense of knowing what goes on. I do read the transcripts as you're taking part in this activity. Ron and I are available online to respond to any questions that you might have, to clarify some of the documents. For the most part, we stay out of it. We really want you to be the decision makers and the ones to come up with a solution to a realistic problem, which is, again, the budget reduction. I hope that this is helpful to you in providing you with some further information about the project, which will be the hybrid exercise number 1. It is an opportunity to really express your thoughts to each other and to learn from each other. And I think that we have found many students really gain a lot in many ways from this type of activity. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. I am responsive to your emails, as well as Ron is in the class with you, and any questions you might have prior to the assignment, you certainly can raise them for him. Best of luck on this exercise, and I really do look forward to reading your comments online.